Hi everyone, in today's lesson we are going to talk about the Industrial Revolution. Now you might have heard of this when you were in US history, focusing on the United States Industrial Revolution, but we're going to back it up and talk about the British Industrial Revolution, which kicks off an industrial revolution around the world. How many times can I say Industrial Revolution today? It's probably going to be a lot. Make sure you're in your interactive notebook and you're following along. All right, we're on page 7 of your interactive notebook. And again, today we're talking about the Industrial Revolution. Let's start off with our essential question. How did the Industrial Revolution start and then soon spread to other countries? What we want to first talk about is what's industrialization? What's a definition for it? The revolution that we're talking about today starts in Great Britain around the mid-1700s. And this revolution is a little bit different from what we've been talking about because it's a revolution about machinery and improving output. So the Industrial Revolution goes on to greatly increase the output of machine-made goods. We're moving away from individual man-made goods doing all the steps by literal hand and more mechanized, again, machine-made goods. Industrialization, as I said, is moving from machine production, from man-made to machine production of goods. And Britain is set up pretty well during this time period that it's got a lot of natural resources that are going to lend itself to the Industrial Revolution. Some of them being coal, iron, the fact that they have rivers that they can transport things up and down, and then harbors that they can dock in and trade with other places. They also have an expanding economy, so that's going to encourage investment in Britain and its resources. And they also have all of the needed factors of production. Remember that term from way back when, economics? They have the land, they have the labor, and they have the capital. So Britain is a great place for this to kick off. And then, as we said, it's going to spread to other countries. Something else that takes place during this time period is another agricultural revolution. If you remember way back when we started this unit, we talked about, in the beginnings of man, we had an agricultural revolution. There are later agricultural revolutions, and this time period has a really big one. They start changing the way in which they're farming. They come up with what are called enclosures, or this idea of taking a large farm and starting to literally enclose it by using fences or hedges or stone walls, whatever materials they had on hand. Wealthy landowners are coming in and buying up the land and then enclosing it. And these are going to be places that were once owned by village farmers. Enclosures are also going to allow for experimentation with new or different agricultural methods. One of these being crop rotation. We talked about this a little bit with medieval Europe, where they realized that, if we keep farming the land, it's not going to turn out so well. So we start to see crop rotation crop back up. Pardon the pun, come back during this time period. So they decide to start switching out the crops and rotating the fields so that they don't deplete the soil of its natural resources. Livestock breeders are also going to start breeding with only the best of their stock in order to improve food quality. Inventions are going to be the name of the game during the Industrial Revolution because technology at the time, it's very antiquated to us, but this new technology during this time period is going to spur the Industrial Revolution. So some of the things that come out during this time period, in the textile mills, weavers are going to use things called flying shuttles. No, it's not something that flies in the air like a space shuttle. It's a method used for weaving like I said, in the textile mills. They're going to use flying shuttles and something else called a spinning jenny to help them. We're also going to have something known as the water frame that's going to be used to power our spinning wheels. The power looms, spinning mules, they're going to speed up production and improve quality. That's going to be a common theme during the Industrial Revolution. Everything's going to, speed up production. That's also going to improve quality. It also is going to drive down prices. It's going to make things more affordable, more accessible. And so people are going to be starting to, move up in society. We have this new concept during this time period of a factory. Again, these are things that we have grown up with and we know about, but back then they had never had factories before. So this is going to be a dedicated building that contains that machinery where people come in to work, and it's dedicated to manufacturing these goods. The cotton gin in the United States comes out in the mid 1800s, I believe. And that's going to increase cotton production and Great Britain and the United States are going to trade, and that's going to lead into helping out those textile mills as well. We're going to have lots of improvement in transportation as well. The steam engine is created by Watts. The need for cheap, convenient power is going to spur that here. Trying to literally ship something faster, that was needed to keep prices down. So James Watt improves the steam engine, and he's financed by a gentleman by the name of Matthew Boulton. Boulton was an entrepreneur, kind of another new term for this time period. He was in charge of organizing and managing and taking risks and creating a new business. So entrepreneurs are popping up here and there during the Industrial Revolution, financing different projects, in order to spur economic and industrial growth. Water transportation is going to change as well. We have the first steamboat that comes out in 1807. We have improved transportation because more canals are dug out and used. Road transportation is going to change as well. The roads are going to be improved, which is, improving roads is going to speed up transportation. Companies are going to start using them as toll roads, and that's going to generate profit, or generate revenue, I should say, to help, again, pour money back into the nation. And then finally, we also have railway transportation that comes out. The railway system or railroads becomes huge during this time period because it's going to, again, spur that industrial growth. It's going to create more jobs. And again, it's cheaper transportation, so that's going to boost these different industries. It's also going to lead people to start living in the cities, which becomes huge because of the workforce that needs to get to their job quicker. So if they're living in the city, they're there faster. So let's go ahead and talk about different changes in people's lives during this time period. Factories are going to be paying more than farms, so that's going to lead a lot of people to say, I don't want to work on the farm anymore, I'm going to go work over there. It's also going to spur demand for more expensive goods because people are going to be making more money, so I can go out and spend that money on stuff that I might not have been able to afford prior to the Industrial Revolution. Urbanization is going to become huge. People are going to move away from those farms, away from the countryside, and start moving into the cities or the urban areas. A growing population is going to lead to a growing workforce, and it's going to lead for a market for factory-generated goods. Living conditions, even though everybody's moving to the city, that's probably it's not the best place to live. A lot of people are motivated to live there because of the proximity to the factories, but with massive amounts of people coming to live in a very small place doesn't lead to the best living conditions. So we have widespread sickness, epidemics, cholera, which is not a fun one to have, are going to come into these urban slums. Living conditions are going to be lots of people in very tight quarters. And so, like I said, that's not going to be the best place that you want to be. The lifespan at this time was about 17 years. So living in one large city, typically a person could live there for about 17 years. Not very good, Wealthy merchants and factory owners are going to be the big fat cats living luxurious lives in their suburban homes, making money off of the literal blood, sweat, and tears of these factory workers. So that's going to cause some problems later on. These rapidly growing cities are going to lack sanitary codes, building codes, those safety things that we have today. They didn't have any of those today. And this is something like going back to our first couple videos when we talked about the Indus River Valley and how they had, plumbing and a sewage system and, a grid system all done. How come they didn't take off of this during this time period? They just kind of went away. So it's interesting to see that, we had it way back when, but here in the early, 1800s, nothing. So anyway, side note. Cities are also not going to have adequate housing. They're not going to have adequate education, police protection, fire squads, things like that. All are not going to be there. And unfortunately, during this time period, we're going to see that the way in which they realize, we need a crew to put out a fire or police protection is going to be through some bad things happening. And then they realize, we should do this to solve that problem. Working conditions are also not going to be the best for all of these factory workers. Although they're getting paid more than a farm, an average working day is going to be about 14 hours for 6 days a week. year round. So literally a lot of these people only had one day off. And if they did, it probably wasn't like, hey, let me sleep all day. It was doing other things. Some might even, again, that's the average. People might be working all 7 days for even more hours. It depended on the family situation, the job, you name it. These factories are going to be very dirty, poorly lit. They're going to lend themselves to constant injury because, again, they don't have those safety codes. They are fueled with soot and grime from all the coal that's burned off, chemicals. So they're not the best place to live. Common killer of people was by coal dust. So ingesting that, like, it was not pretty. But again, people took it as a trade-off because you were getting paid more than working on the farm. So it just depended on what they were looking for. We do see, as I said before, we're going to see some struggles between the different classes. The middle class that's coming up, they're the skilled workers, they're the merchants, they're the rich farmers, they're going to be different professionals. They're coming into this new middle class. They are looked down upon by our wealthy landowners, though, and our other aristocrats. So the high society are turning their nose up to this middle class. They're still not good enough. But the middle class is comfortable where they're at. They have a decent standard of living. And again, this is an emerging class that we hadn't had before. We had the, very, very wealthy, and then we had the very, very poor. Now we have this middle class that's coming out. We also have a working class that's coming out. And these are the laborers who their lives aren't generally being that well improved. These are the people who are working the hardest, getting paid the least, and other people are capitalizing off of them. Some of these laborers also are starting to see that they're being replaced by machinery during the Industrial Revolution. So that also causes problems. There are groups that actually come in and start to destroy machinery because it put them out of work, and they're so frustrated and so upset. So unemployment was a serious problem during this time period, and there's a lot of riots surrounding around unemployment during this time period as well. So let's lastly wrap up by talking about some of the effects of the Industrial Revolution. Some of the biggest benefits: it does create jobs, it does enrich the nation, and it is going to encourage technological process. There are a slew of new inventions that come out here and then in other places around the world. So it is this industrial and technological revolution that leads itself to other things coming down the pike. Education does start to expand. Goods like clothing become cheaper. Diets start to improve, and your housing starts to improve. It's not going to be done overnight, and it's not going to be for everybody, but we are kind of seeing that trend start to go up during the Industrial Revolution. Workers are eventually going to win better working conditions, including shorter hours, better wages, better conditions, but it's going to be a hard fight for them. But it does come eventually, obviously, because that's the world we live in today. Some of the long-term effects of the Industrial Revolution: we have improved living and working conditions, as I said, as evidence of today. We have increased tax revenues imposed by the government for urban improvement. So they constantly want, that sometimes they're taxing the people to improve these living locations that people, they're not living in the best of conditions. So the Industrial Revolution, again, it's a little bit different from the other revolutions we've been talking about, but I wanted to throw it in here because it does spur so much change and so much growth for people, not only in Great Britain, but again, then it starts to spread worldwide. The United States capitalizes off of it. We have our own Industrial Revolution, which, progressed us as well. So make sure this is in your interactive notebook. And in our next lesson will be our last lesson. We'll be talking about the Russian Revolution. So make sure you tune back in for that one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then.